welcome to another episode of Make Your Mark podcast. Now, I have a really special guest for us today. His name is Matt Bell. He is an experienced entrepreneur and business leader who specializes in B2B marketing, content marketing, B2B growth, B2B leadership, and digital first buying and selling. He is a co-founder of Message Up to assist B2B companies in improving their messaging and delivering effective content without overwhelming their teams. And you're probably thinking, wait, do the teams get overwhelmed? Yes, they do. This is what we're going to be talking about today, as well as several other things. Welcome to the stage, Matt Bell. Oh my goodness, Matt, I am super excited to have you here today.
Okay, it's a pleasure. It's very nice to be online with you, share some thoughts.
Definitely. And there's so many juicy questions I've got for you around entrepreneur. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I would love for you to explain to our listeners today, a bit about your journey, because people tend to think it just happens overnight. A business is built overnight, right? Click of a finger. And when we know that's not the case, right? So please explain a little bit about some of the ups and downs that you've gone through.
Yeah, I love that phrase, behind every overnight success has been 10 years in the making, or whatever. I just butchered it, but whatever. Yes, there's no such thing as overnight success. I agree, or for very few people anyway. But yeah, look, I mean, my journey, I started out life as an engineer. I went to college, studied chemical engineering, one of the most engineering-y disciplines you can do, and had no concept that I would ever be an entrepreneur. I thought I would work for a corporation, have a career, and I guess this was mid-90s, so careers were still a thing in those days. You could join one company and climb your way up the ladder. And I got very fortunate. I worked internationally. I moved around the world, saw some very interesting things, and I got involved with new technology, sort of deploying new technology in an industrial setting, and kind of followed that chain back up and ended up moving to the US. I'm in Houston, Texas now, joining a group that was responsible for taking new technologies out of R&D and deploying them in the business in anger. And that led me into a role in corporate venture capital. So I was helping the company invest its money in new technologies that were being developed, new companies. And that's where I met entrepreneurs. That's where I met young businesses and got the bug. And then, once that bug's in your veins, you're done, right? There's that
Right.
itch does not go away. You've got to keep scratching it. So I got lucky. I got into this venture capital business, even though I had no financial background. They were an interesting corporate venture capital group that brought together technical people like me with people who did have, knowledge of how to actually invest money in a sensible way. And I did that for several years. I ended up springboarding out of that, joining one of the portfolio companies, joining their leadership team, and became a leader in an early stage business, and kind of got to cut my teeth there for several years. We grew that business successfully. Wow. Did two more of those, both backed by venture capital, private equity. And after what would that then be, a decade essentially of having moved over to the small business side of the world, decided, what? Being at the sort of tip of the spear for somebody else is one thing, but running your own business is another. You're kind of a hired gun versus a true entrepreneur. And I felt I wanted the freedom. And you made a comment off air before we started about how we cash in a 40, 50-hour week to take on an 80 or 90-hour week, right? So we think we have freedom over our time, but then we lose all the boundaries. And so at that point, that was 2019, I decided, enough of working for one company for somebody else. I want to work with lots of companies, but for myself. And so that was my journey. And, it's been an interesting one because I've got all these different elements of the value chain. I've seen the world from a lot of different angles, very serendipitously, not by design in any way. But that's my journey. And all of those pieces culminate in who I am today and what, hopefully, the value I can bring to other people.
Absolutely. Now, something that you do differently to what most people do, right? You work with B2B companies. A lot of people decide that when they're an entrepreneur, they're going to be a coach of some sort. They're going to go on their, they're not going to be working with companies, they're going to be individuals.
Right.
And so how did you make that decision that that's not what you're going to do? You're going to stick with B2B?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is B2B companies are individuals, right? They still have a CEO, they still have a marketing officer, they've still got a head of sales, whatever it might be. The difference in B2B compared to consumer is the buyer is a group of people. And so when I say I focus on B2B, it's that, when you're in marketing, there's a lot of things going to marketing, a lot of elements to that, and you can't be good at all of it. And so you have to choose. My background is industrial. I came up through an industrial career path, and so that's what I know best. So that's what I chose. In terms of working with, being a coach to individuals versus working with the company, content marketing in particular is a team sport. So that would be the difference between me saying I'm only going to coach the goalkeeper, or I'm going to try and work with the team as a whole. And so you end up doing a bit of both, right? I mean, there are some of my clients where I get very kind of up close and personal with the CEOs of some of these companies, trying to figure out what the strategy should be, or very, kind of working very specifically, let's say, with the head of marketing. But in the most part, it's with the team as a whole and helping them as a group figure out how they want to grow their business.
Ah, okay, I like that. Now, a few things have come up on my mind now as you've kind of, mentioned working with CEO, working with teams, and then working them together. What are the biggest challenges have you seen with those individuals, like with a CEO, with teams, and then working together? Because they've got to probably have very different challenges, right?
Yeah, of course they do. I mean, the CEO, they both have one common challenge, which is they don't have enough time to get everything done that they want to get done.
Right.
And so they're each prioritizing things. And the CEO has to answer to the founder, the owners of the business. And they may be, the founder, but very often they've got shareholders. Usually by the time I'm working with them, they've got investors and shareholders they need to answer to. And so they've got a lot of stakeholder management to do across a lot of different groups. Obviously, the people that work for them, some of the agencies outside the company that they need to keep happy, and the direct, investor stakeholders as well. Whereas, when I'm working with the marketing and the more the customer facing side, they're worried about the day-to-day. They're worrying about implementing whatever the strategy for the company is, and what fire do we need to fight today. And so there can be a bit of a disconnect. And I think in a good organization, they're sort of shielding each other, right? The frontline guys are taking care of business. The CEO is taking care of the other stakeholders, and they meet somewhere in the middle. In content marketing, where I'm focusing at the moment, my biggest challenge is that most CEOs pay no attention to it at all. And you could say that for marketing in general, not really just content marketing. Marketing is a thing that happens that enables the business, but they don't see that they have a role in it. And I disagree with that. I was a very marketing focused CEO when I had the privilege to be in that chair. I think it's extremely important. The CEO is the face of the franchise. All the senior leaders,
Right.
we talk CEO is kind of the placeholder for the big boys at the top. They're the face of the franchise. They're the people that people look to see, what is this brand really about? Is it authentic? Why is it in business? They set the tone. And then when you want to take resources from across the company and have them work on something like content marketing instead of, or as well as actually their other roles within the business, someone's got to give that enough priority and say, no, this is important. So you
Yeah.
should spend some time on it, maybe at the expense of something else. And I, the CEO, I'm going to referee that and make sure those resources are being spent in the right places. And so a lot of my job is coaching CEOs to take a more active role and manage that relationship with the rest of the team to get stuff done.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so basically you're going in there and creating a better culture with the whole organization, right? And making sure that, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO to actually communicate with your team because they're the ones that are actually implementing, putting things into place.
Yes, and I talk about, and I mentioned this in one of my books, that CEOs, everybody lives on a spectrum between being very hands off and being a micromanager, and there's a fine balance there, right? So that CEO can be basically, here it is, here's the strategy, go do it, don't bother me unless like the world is ending. Or they say, here's the strategy, and I'm not going to let go of it. I'm actually going to be meddling with everything you're doing. And they become a bottleneck, right? They don't have the time, the bandwidth to make decisions in an effective manner. So finding that balance where they're lending enough support that they enable the rest of the team to do its work, but not being so involved that they become an interference. That's tough. I mean, and most people that are being in a CEO role, they didn't get a degree in CEOing.
No.
Nobody's ever taught them how to be a CEO,
Right.
especially for an entrepreneur, right? Very often you've been a technical person and boom, you start a company, I'm the CEO. Great, sounds cool. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do it?
Right.
How do I manage all, these, especially as the team grows?
Yeah.
You can manage 10 people, then 20, then 100. It's a very different skill set.
Definitely. I totally agree. And it's funny because I have worked with CEOs, right, that say they want to let go, but they can't,
That's hard.
right? They're gripping onto this and they're kind of they're making it stop working for themselves,
Yep,
right?
agree.
So how do you go in there, right? With say someone that can't let go, says they want to let go, can't let go, and help them actually see that it's better off that they do let go and let the team actually just take over?
I don't think there is an easy answer. I think that is a realization, I should say, that the CEOs eventually got to come to themselves. I have worked with some that don't, and they refuse, and they continue to be a bottleneck, and the company struggles. Quite often they'll run out of money, and then they go try to raise money from an investor, and the investor says, yeah, that's great, but you're the bottleneck. And it's kind of a slap in the face. And then they'll either go, yes, I am. Okay, I need to hire a head of product, or I need to do some, I need to become CTO, hire a CEO, whatever it is. Or they don't, and they think, oh, that's insulting, and they walk away. So I don't know that there is anything I can actually do to force, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. Now, having said that, I do think it helps to show examples, right? I think we all, when we're sitting in the CEO seat, go, this is unique. My situation is different from everybody else's. And yes, in some ways it will be, it should be, right? Hopefully the business is unique. But in many cases, no, it's not. All these other CEOs have gone through exactly the same struggles as you. They've had to also give up control of things that they're very reluctant, that they don't genuinely believe other people can do as well as they can. And so actually forming those networks, introducing CEOs to each other and go, listen, have a chat to this guy, because he went through this problem last year. And
Yeah.
he's a recovering micromanager like you, or he's, but once they make that connection and go, oh, wait, this isn't about me. This is about the role I'm in, the growth the company's going through. This is a natural process. The company has to split. It has to hire managers. It has to build departments. They're kind of a necessary evil. Other people have gone down that road before me, so I can do it too.
Yes, I totally agree. And I guess having that network of other people that you can even speak to about it, because I think when you're in that position, you kind of feel like you're on your own, right?
Yep.
This is just happening to me, right? And you don't realize that it actually happens to every single person that's in that position and growing. And so with that being said, regards to working with B2B companies, right? And you're saying that it's working with smaller companies, bigger companies, very different when it comes to marketing strategies and content and the stuff that you put out there, right? So how does it change from maybe going to being a solopreneur to then being a B2B company? What kind of things should you be focusing on?
So I think as a B2B company grows, look, all companies exist because of their customer. And you are in a business to business sense, you're always selling to other businesses. Obviously, you're selling to a group of people within that business. You might have a focal person there that you're selling to, but in reality, it's a committee that's going to make the decision what a company buys almost always. We talk about buying committees, buyer personas, the different roles that sit on a buying committee. And you need to have a good understanding of all those people and what their needs are, and how they want to buy, what their buying process is going to be. As a solopreneur, you can't really do that, right? You just don't have the bandwidth to do that amount of homework, to have the knowledge, the tacit knowledge, to know how to approach those different people in those different companies. And so you have to build a team around you that's capable of doing that. I mentioned a little while ago that content marketing is a team sport. You need people who are customer facing and really understand the customer's challenges at a hands-on level. They've been there, they've done that. You need financial people that understand how the business model works for your customer as well. And then obviously up at the sort of decision maker level, that's a little easier to understand business to business, right? They're trying to make a good financial cost benefit decision for their company, but trying to get all those different people on the right page so they make the choice to then come and buy your product. And a B2B business has to build that skill set to be able to do that.
Right. You also mentioned earlier on about different personas, right? When you're in a B2B company and you've built it to that point and you've got all these different personalities, right, on your team, how do you make sure that you're seen as a CEO or a manager, right, as managing the team, that you're actually listening, but also making sure that you're being effective with where you're putting your energy?
Yeah, listening, that's difficult. I'm a talker, not a listener. Too much. Lesson I had to learn the hard way several times throughout my
Ah,
career. You're right. I mean, that's hard. I think you have to be very intentional with it. Time becomes the one commodity none of us ever have enough of, right? Everything we do just
yeah.
sort of expands to fill the time available. And the CEO role is exceptional that it is pulled in a million different directions. And so ruthless prioritization becomes, the hallmark of most CEOs. Yes, they work long hours. Yes, they work many days a week. But even within that, they're having to prioritize. And I think making communication a priority becomes super important. Otherwise, you can become very disconnected from the whole team or part of the team, and they feel disenfranchised, and suddenly all sorts of people quit, or there's a bit of a mutiny, and you wonder where it came from. So yeah, certainly had some unfortunate personal experience with that happening, and had to learn that the hard way. I think we're at the moment, culturally, meetings are very unpopular, right? So everybody wants to nix all the meetings off the calendar and say they're a waste of time. We don't need them anymore. We have Slack, we have whatever to communicate through. And actually, I think it's we need to have the useful meetings need to be on the calendar, and the ones that should never have been a meeting need to get taken off. And some of those useful meetings are about staying connected with different parts of the organization and doing the listening and having those productive conversations.
Okay, now you got me curious. Now you mentioned that it's something that you've gone down and you had to learn lessons from this. So you're going to tell us a few stories as to what's happened, because I know listeners love to learn from other people's mistakes so they don't make them, right? So tell us what's happened there.
Yeah, it's probably a decade has passed now, so I can tell the stories without them coming around and knocking on my front door. They know where I live. No, I mean, one of my earliest CEO roles, manufacturing organization, we had sales rep in the US. So we'd had international too, but I think 8, 10 at a certain point, different districts that we were selling to within the US, and each of them had a sales manager. And to be honest, I lost touch with those salespeople. I focused very much on building the bigger business and working on the marketing and growing the brand and dealing with the shareholders, and the frontline sales guys, who were really the ones, of course, who were bringing in the money for the company, felt like I didn't understand them. And the mutiny that I mentioned, a little group of them got together and said, "This is no good. This guy's not listening to us." And they went kind of behind my back to one of the shareholders and had a conversation at that level and said, "This isn't working." And I ended up in a pickle, right? I had a really difficult situation to manage. We managed our way through it. There were some changes in roles, and there was certainly some very honestly angry conversations about compensation and recognition and who was getting what territories and things that I had just sort of left alone, but had festered without me realizing it into something that had got quite a bit out of control. And so we brought in an outside consultant to help. So now, role reversal. Now I'm going in doing not quite the same thing, but I see it from the other side. We brought in some great guys, girls that came in and worked with the team to understand the dynamics, try to figure out what the real issues were, and help us find the solutions that got everybody back on the same page, pulling in the same direction. But one of the contributing factors was that I had ignored it. I had deprioritized it. I'd chosen to focus my limited time somewhere else and assumed that it would be okay, and that people between me and them were doing what they needed to do, and it wasn't the case. Now, okay, retrospective, what should I have done differently? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I shouldn't assume that any part of the business is functioning fine without checking in a bit more often than I was. And probably the signs were there. Obviously, I don't know exactly what I was seeing in an email or being told and choosing to selectively hear, but my guess is that there were some signs I should have picked up on, and instead of going, it'll be all right, they're just being salespeople, I should have said, wait a second, that that might get out of hand. Let's make sure it's being dealt with properly.
Okay. So when something like that happens, right, like you said, it does fester for a long time. It's not something that just kind of happens overnight, right? And then you go in and you try and fix it, right? Or you want to kind of find out what the problem is, what's going on. Let's come up with a solution together. How long did it take, right, for the team, for everyone to come together, to communicate, to make sure everything is okay again, to make sure that everything is settled down and the business is now continuing and the teams are continuing to keep moving forward? How long does something like that take?
I think on the face of it, it doesn't have to take very long, right? I mean, it depends how quick it is to implement it. If there's a quick fix, get it done. Boom, let's move forward. A grievance can be settled quite quickly. But I think in this case, there were needed to be structural changes to who was working for whom and how, some of the work was being allocated, how some of the incentive schemes, and those you can't just, magically click your fingers and make those happen. So let's say it took 2 or 3 months to really dig into it, really acknowledge how big the problem was, and then work out some solutions. What really takes time is rebuilding trust.
Yeah.
And building trust, as everybody knows, takes a long time. You don't just, well, some of us are very trusting, we trust straight away, and then we get burned, and if we get burned, then it takes a long time to rebuild that trust. And implicitly, an employment relationship is a trust relationship. You're going to trust the company's going to do right by you, and company trusts you as an employee to behave and do the best, act in the best interest of the company. And when that gets breached, but the relationship continues. So obviously, a lot of times when trust gets breached, people leave, whether they're being pushed out or they choose to leave. But then rebuilding that trust takes time, and I think it took several months before everybody was sort of calmed down and really. And I assume, I mean, I don't even know, right? Some of them may still feel that was not handled right, and a lot of us have now moved on to other organizations. So yeah, but hopefully at least much like a wound heals very quickly, but the scar can take a long time for that scar to disappear. I think you end up with scar tissue in an organization, and that can come back around if you it's there as a reminder to people that, wait a second, I wasn't treated the way I thought I should be treated, or whatever it was. So
Okay, so if there were three particular things that you think that people need to be keeping in the forefront of their mind when they have a B2B company, right? What would those three things be, and to kind of make sure that implemented straight away?
The customer is number one, and that is a horrible cliche. But I think I see, and I read about, but I encounter plenty of companies who say, "Oh, we put the customer first." Yeah. The reality is they don't. They do a lot of talking to the customer, do a lot of nice things for the customer, but actually stopping and say, right, what does the customer need? What do they need from me? What do they need to hear? For them to understand their challenge, for them to figure out the right solution, and for them potentially to choose us. That always be helping mantra of being there. I think if you can get that going from the start, you're in good shape. One of the reasons it doesn't happen is very few of us, none of us almost, have grown up in companies like that. That's not the old way of doing things, right? Sales-led companies were the way. And so when we bring in experienced people that have been to that rodeo a few times, it's a different mindset. It's a mindset shift. I wrote a blog post about it recently, of this mindset shift from always be closing, always be selling, to always be helping. And that, get that in place first. I think the second thing is, don't wait too long to hire. We talked about the CEO being a bottleneck and not being able to hand things over. That's at one level, but it happens throughout the organization. And what we tend to do, and I saw it happen in my own company, is we have one person doing a job and we wait until they break and actually drop the ball, or simply can't cope, or have a emotional, sort of mental health situation or whatever. And then we suddenly go, oh my goodness, they're overwhelmed. Let's hire somebody else to help them. It's too late, right? By that point, we're fighting a crisis. And so I think planning the organization's growth, thinking about what we're going to need, and then hiring people proactively. Now that's tough when you have a shareholder that's watching counting the beans every day and saying, that burn rate's too high, you shouldn't be spending that much money. So that's a thing the CEO has to lead and say, hey, we're going to need that person in 6 months' time. I can't wait for 6 months to hire them. I got to start that process now. Yes, it's going to cost me some money, but then we'll be able to keep growing without hitting a wall at some point, along the way. So how many is that? Is that two? What would my third thing be to get in place straight away? I think probably something you hit on earlier, which is establishing how the company's going to communicate, making sure the communication channels are there, that people have a mechanism. Not everybody wants to stand up in an all hands meeting and say, hey, Mr. CEO, I got a problem with this, right? So, and it isn't all about problems. A lot of it's about good ideas. How are innovative ideas going to be surfaced? The suggestion box in the corner of the break room it's probably not the best way, right? There are good tools out there for feeling the pulse of the company, giving people opportunity to give feedback and creative ideas. So making sure that there's that understanding amongst the team about how we're going to play the game, how we're going to communicate with each other. And then as the company grows, that will grow with it, right? It'll be the way things are done around here. And so that is a good thing to get in place in the beginning.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you have mentioned, Matt, that you've written blogs, right? But you've also written a book, right? You're an author. You've written, there you go, 2 books. So
I'm leagues ahead of anybody that's only written one, right?
Right, definitely. Oh my goodness. So tell us a little bit about your books and how they can really help people.
So there is a story to why there are two books. What I set out to do was, so back in summer of 2021, I looked at a lot of the projects that we've been working on and said, what's at the heart of these? Where are these companies really struggling? And homed in on this content marketing that we talked about in the beginning. And it really stems from the fact that we were going through a digital transformation. Yes. B2B has been always lags behind B2C, right? So consumers race ahead. Online shopping, you can go online now, search whatever you want, order it, deliver it, you're done, right? From your couch. Those same human beings work at B2B companies, right? They're the buyers at B2B companies. They're like, well, I want that at work too. So that transformation was very slowly happening from in-person buying and selling towards digital. Then COVID happened. All of the buyers go to work from home. They move from being a centralized office to working all over the place. They're not coming back. I mean, some of them will return to the office, but by and large, buying is something that can be done from anywhere and can be done online. COVID drives the development of the tools. That means this online experience for a business buyer is now looking a lot more like it does for you and I sitting on our couch, shopping from Amazon. And so suddenly, as a B2B company that used to be able to go to a trade show or meet people in person, suddenly you have to be discoverable online. And if you're not, it's like you don't exist. And so I describe this as content marketing, which is the process of making your company and your products visible online, suddenly became mission critical. That's the title of the book, Content Marketing Mission Critical. And I go, wow, all these companies are suddenly struggling with this because they've not been used to doing it. They don't have the skills. They grew up in a different way. We need to put a framework around that. There has to be an approach that these companies can follow to tool up and become better at content marketing. And so I took a deep dive. I did a lot of research, spoke to a lot of people, put together a manuscript for what I call Content Marketing Mission Critical, how to be effective at B2B content marketing. Hired an editor, wonderful woman, Molly Gage, fantastic editor, and said, see what you can do with this. And she took it and she went, there's loads of great content here, but you have a problem. Your baby is twins. And in fact, it's Siamese twins. You have two books that are intertwined and they need to be separated. One is for CEOs who are defining the strategy and leading the strategy and making this thing important. The other is for marketing leaders who have to go operationalize that strategy. And they don't want to read each other's stuff, right? The CEO wants to learn how to set the strategy and lead it, but they don't want to know how to do the day-to-day. And the marketing leader doesn't really care about purpose and mission and vision and how to go about setting all that stuff to underpin them. They want to know how to make this thing happen and get the results and the nitty-gritty. So it became two books. The second one is called Content Marketing, Making the Magic Happen. That's the one for the marketer. Content Marketing Mission Critical became for the CEO, and they were published at the same time. So one is blue, one is green. You can tell the two apart.
Okay, and so if the listeners are thinking, oh my goodness, I want to purchase these books, where can they go purchase them?
The simplest way is go to messageup.com. That's a company website. Look in the nav. There's a link called books, and that will take you to the links to the books. They are available on Amazon. They're also available direct from the publisher. If you go to the direct from the publisher website, you can use discount codes. Amazon doesn't let me give out discount codes. But so Mission VIP 33 and Magic VIP 33. Those are the two discount codes. If you go to the publisher, it's called BookBaby, other publisher.
Oh, fantastic. We will make sure that we have them in the show notes.
We'll put them in the show notes. Yes, absolutely.
And so people can scroll down and make sure you go and get your codes. Make sure you go and purchase these books. But I've got one more question for you, Matt. Right, as you touched on it,
it's gonna be a good one, I can tell.
You touched on it slightly, right? Regards to technology and how digital marketing has changed. What are your thoughts on this whole AI and
we almost got through a whole podcast without saying AI. Okay. I'm not a code geek. So I cannot speak authoritatively on large language models and AI and where it's going, what it's going to be. Is it going to be the end of the world? I don't think so. This is not general AI that can take over the world. What we're really talking about is generative AI, right? Where we type stuff into ChatGPT or Midjourney or whatever, and it comes up with images and things. So I have two very strong views about it, which I'll try to express briefly. One is if you don't get on board with it, it's not going to put you out of a job. Somebody else that embraces it is going to put you out of a job. So I can be a content marketer that does things old school, or I can be a content marketer that leverages AI to the best of my ability, and I'm likely to win because it makes certain things ridiculously fast and easy, right? It can do research in a click of a button that it would take, me hours and hours to Google around before. So that's part one, which is I think we all have to figure out, how can I, take advantage? It'd be like saying I'm not going to use the internet back in, the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And eventually you're forced to, because otherwise everybody that is using the internet have leapt ahead of you, and you're out of business. The second thing is to remember that generative AI summarizes information from the internet. It doesn't know anything. It can't make up anything new. All it can do is combine things that it finds.
Right.
So it goes in the pantry, it looks for ingredients that match what you said you like to eat, and it goes, here you go, and it looks like a beautiful plate of food, right? Is it a chef? No, it's not. It followed a recipe that it found, it followed ingredients that it found, and it chucked it on a page very, very effectively. So it writes good stuff, but all it's doing is hoovering up regurgitating existing, so I shouldn't use regurgitating and chef in the same metaphor, should I really? But it's regurgitating that. So if you want to produce effective content, by all means, use generative AI to hoover up information, but put something original into it. Content needs to be original, and it needs to be authentic. So it has to be written by you with your ideas in it, using generative AI to, to give you the bricks to build with.
Okay, all right. See, there's a lot of people that are like AI, ChatGPT, it's the one. Everyone should be doing it. It's so easy. But it still doesn't humanize the content, which is what our consumers, our clients all need to see, right?
And it's amplifying the noise, right? So now suddenly hundreds of people can turn out hundreds of pieces of content, thousands, obviously in both cases, very, very easily. Great, but they're all going to be the same because they're all coming from the same source. And then only the ones who have some original ideas should be able to sort of float to the top. Now, the question I think is going to be, how do we figure out how do we stand out? Because the noise level just went up. It got louder on all of the channels with all of this ChatGPT assisted content. How do we demonstrate that we are authentic? I think the search engines are good at doing that. I think people underestimate how effectively Google's AI assisted algorithm is at spotting AI generated content and trying to figure out which content is authoritative and has original ideas in it.
Right.
At the end of the day, it'll be self-selecting, because if 20 pieces of content are out there and I read all 20, I'm going to focus on the one that engages me, and that will be the one with original ideas and authenticity in it. That will eventually then get more likes, it will get more views, and the search engines will go, wait, that must be something more original, because people are actually finding it satisfying, and it will get promoted. So there's no way to win by faking it. You have to actually put effort into content to make it work.
Absolutely. I love it. Now, I know, Matt, at this point, we probably got some listeners thinking, oh my goodness, I need to have a conversation with Matt, right? Like, there's so many holes that I'm looking at that's just been identified because of Matt speaking right now. I need to have a conversation with him. So if they want to speak with you, connect with you, where can they go?
So you're welcome to email me at matt@messageup.com. Excuse me. Although handing out one's email is always a dangerous thing. It'll flood my inbox, I'm sure. Probably people saying that, Matt, you're a complete idiot. What are you talking about? But maybe one or two will be positive.
Don't put out your telephone number, because then you really will be making.
Well, I don't answer it anyway. It's all spam. The other way is on LinkedIn. So search Matt Bell on LinkedIn, or search for Message Up. Go to the Message Up company page. Follow the Message Up company page. That would be nice too. And you'll find my contact information on there. And yeah, I'd love to connect and talk about all things leadership and B2B marketing.
Awesome. Now, guys, everything that Matt has mentioned, the links to buy his books, how to connect with him, they will all be in the show notes. So make sure you do scroll down and go and check out, go and connect with him. Go and like all of his stuff, go buy his book, go and have that conversation with him, because he will be able to turn your business around and identify loopholes that maybe you haven't even noticed yourself, right? Because it happens. Matt, it was so awesome having you on the show. So many golden nuggets in such a short amount of time. Thank you so much. My absolute pleasure. Let's do episode 2 soon. Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much. And I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.